Thank you for tuning in. This is 101.5 KZKA FM, home of the Wolves, here at the Los Angeles Academy of Arts and Enterprise. This is an interview made by students for the Los Angeles community to showcase local artists, musicians, politicians, and local creatives. Please enjoy.
Hi, this is DJ Kai from 101.5 KZKFM, and here with me I have Alex Alvarez from Gnomon. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, my name's Alex, and I'm the founder and president of Gnomon, which is an art school in Hollywood. And so it's like visual effects, animation, game art, stuff like that, which I've been doing for the last 20 years. And I'm also an artist working in the visual effects industry too.
That sounds like a lot of fun. I would love to learn about that. What made you want to start doing visual effects?
I've always been into art since I was a kid, and mostly drawing. And but when I was probably like around 18, Jurassic Park came out, and Terminator 2 came out. These two movies, and these were big movies for computer graphics. And so the dinosaurs was the first time we saw like photorealistic stuff put into a computer where you couldn't really tell that it wasn't real. And everybody was talking about it, and so everybody heard about the fact that computers were used for this. And so I was super curious. And then Terminator 2 came out and had like the Silver Man and all this kind of stuff, and it was just like, what is going on? And so I was curious about it, but this is before the internet, which is hard to remember the world without it. But the reality is, like, researching stuff was really hard before the internet. So figuring out what is computer graphics and where is it done and how do you learn about it took a while back then. And once I finally discovered it and learned that on a Macintosh you could actually buy these 3D programs in the early 90s, I bought one, a cheap one, and started playing with it and just fell in love with computer graphics. And that's 25 years ago-ish. And then I wanted to get access to more powerful computers, and then just went down the rabbit hole of just wanting to learn more about computer graphics. So, yeah.
Did your parents ever support you in your decision to make like visual effects in video games?
Unfortunately, my dad died when I was 17, but he was but he was always super supportive of my interest in drawing, but not necessarily as a career. I mean, he definitely was somebody who thought, grades were really the only thing that mattered. And so his emphasis for me in school was always do your homework and get good grades. And then that's really the priority, like every parent. My mom, always supportive. I mean, she was, she definitely was happy for me to do what I wanted in my free time. And so the fact that I spent a lot of my free time drawing, she was fine with. But once I got older, meaning like became like a senior in high school, obviously she was like, go to college, find a normal job, be great if you became a doctor or a lawyer, the kind of stuff that typical parents think about, I dealt with also. So when I went to a normal college, which my mom was very happy about, and then I realized I wanted to be an artist and learn visual effects, and I dropped out of college. Obviously, my mom wasn't happy about that at all. So it took her a while, obviously, for her to be comfortable with my decision, because it took me a while to find the right path and find a job, So I think parents just want you to be okay and want you to take care of yourself and support yourself. So I would say supportive in the sense that they loved me.
Yeah.
But they didn't understand what I was into at all. Yeah.
I know you said this already, but what inspired you to do an animation career in virtual effects? What inspired you? I know you said drawing. Is there anything else that helped you inspire
I think, Star Wars came out when I was 4. And I was obsessed with Star Wars. I mean, seriously.
Star Wars.
Star Wars was amazing. And it trips me out that it's still a thing today, because the movie came out in 77. That's a long time ago. But the fact that they brought it back and continue to make movies today is awesome, because obviously kids, including my kids, know what Star Wars is. But I still have all my action figures from when I was 5. So when my son turned 5, I gave him my action figures. And so I was very into it, meaning fantasy, science fiction. Read a lot of comic books, read a lot of fantasy books when I was a kid. When I was a teenager, 13, I read Lord of the Rings way before movies came out. And man, I mean, I fell in love with those books. And then video games. especially like Dungeons and Dragons type games, of fantasy role-playing type of games I was really into as a teenager. So I think all of those interests, science fiction, fantasy, reading, comic books, drawing, like those are the ingredients that make you curious about this industry, because what does the entertainment industry do? It creates that stuff, that content visually. And so to me, as I discovered our industry and learned that you could get paid to be an animator or an artist, to design creatures or to animate characters or to create background environments, it really just blew my mind that was a job, and that nobody told me. That in high school or elementary school, nobody ever said like, oh, another career path since you like to draw is the entertainment industry. People, when they saw that I like to draw, mentioned maybe architecture. I think like that's one thing that a lot of people back then understood. And even today, I don't think a lot of people know about our industry, because I think everybody knows about movies and everybody knows about video games, but they don't know that it's made by people because the media doesn't talk about it, right? The media, when the movie comes out, just wants to interview the actors. They want to interview the director, and that's it. But how often does the media say who designed the creatures, right? Or who designed the backgrounds? They don't really talk about it, and so you don't hear these names and realize that it's just people, which is unfortunate. And so ultimately, like, who designed Darth Vader? Like, who knows that, right? Like in my industry, people know it because, Ralph McQuarrie is this iconic person, right? Who's this amazing designer, right? But nobody, like in the regular population, really knows that because the media doesn't talk about it. But he should be a superstar. He designed all the iconic characters in Star Wars, right? Or a movie like Blade Runner, like the original Blade Runner. The new one's beautiful too, but the original one, like, who designed that, because there is one person who's responsible for the iconic visual look of that movie. This guy, Sid Mead, who lives in Pasadena, who's this amazing artist. So I think that as you discover that all of these amazing things are just made by regular people, and you start learning about the people, that's how you can start to sort of like figure out that it's for you. But yeah, for me, I wasn't really exposed to it. I had to dig. Yeah.
Yeah. What did you do? Did you do before visual effects? Like, did you have any electives, any like other jobs besides, like, did you have any other career paths?
Well, like I said, I dropped out of college, and so when I was in college, I still didn't know what I wanted to do. Right, so I graduated high school assuming that I was going to go to college and find a regular job, and had no idea what that meant. In high school, for a second, I thought I wanted to get into astrophysics because I read like a Carl Sagan book called Contact. They made a movie out of it, and the movie's amazing. And I was like, oh, astrophysics sounds cool. And then I took a calculus class senior year, and I was like, there is no way I can be an astrophysicist. Calculus isn't for me. Anyway, and so I went into college a little lost, which I think a lot of people do. Like, I didn't know what I wanted to do for anything. And the end of your second year in college, at least the college I went to, you have to declare a major, which is what you're going to study for the next 2 years. And all my friends had no problem picking a major, right? They were just like, oh, I'm going to do mathematics, I'm going to do history, I'm going to do communications, I'm going to do English, and I had no idea. Like, I took all these random classes for 2 years, which are awesome, but I couldn't think of any of the classes that I wanted to choose as my major other than art. Like, art was the only thing that I really loved doing. Everything else felt like homework. But like drawing didn't feel like homework to me. But the college I was at, the art classes were really bad. It was a very small art program. That's why I dropped out of college. So I still dropped out a little confused about like, well, I know that I loved art. And then that's when Jurassic Park came out. So when I dropped out of college, I knew I was interested in figuring out what I wanted to do. And then a friend of mine who was going to CSUN, Cal State Northridge in the Valley, told me that he saw a job posting for a comic book company that was hiring for colorists. And he's like, oh, your pencil drawings are really good. Like, you should apply. And I'd never had, a job like that before. Didn't think I would get it, but I called the phone number and they're like, oh, come in for an interview, bring your portfolio. So I brought in all these colored pencil drawings that I'd done in high school. Mm-hmm. And they looked at them. They're like, cool, you're hired. Minimum wage. It was like $7 an hour. And it was just okay. And that's all they said. And I showed up for work on the first day. It was going to be, and this was right after dropping out, like maybe a month after dropping out of college. So like just so lucky that my friends saw that job posting. And I show up, and there's a room like full of computers, and they're like, yeah, we color the comic books on the computer. So just sit there, and somebody's already scanned the line art, because with comic books, somebody draws it in pencil, and then somebody inks it, and then they take the ink drawing and scan it into the computer, and then you color it on the computer. So like somebody's already scanned the line art, it's right there for you in Photoshop, and now you color it. And I'm like, I've never used Photoshop. I have no idea what I'm supposed to do. Like, oh, that's cool. Nobody does. Like, we'll teach you. So I just looked at the person sitting to my right. And I was like, what do I do? And this girl, Ruth, was sitting there. And she just said, like, okay, you do this and you do this. And this is the lasso tool. And this is how you select an area. And this is how you use a gradient tool and how you color it. And I worked there for a year. Coloring comics, and it was so awesome because I'm getting paid to color comics. Granted, it was minimum wage, but I was 21. I mean, it was fine. I was living in the valley in Reseda. I could pay my rent, and I was surrounded by all these artists, like where for them this wasn't like a pit stop, like this was their career, right? I just stumbled into this building in the valley full of creative people who had creative careers. Some were writers, pencilers, inkers, colorists. And I was like, this is so awesome. Like, I've found a community. And so comic books was like my first creative job. And then Jurassic Park came out, Terminator 2 came out, and then I was like, I need to get into computer graphics.
Yeah. How long have you been doing virtual effects? Besides high school, do you plan on keep going with this career, or do you plan on moving on?
Well, I mean, my interest in drawing on paper as a kid transitioned into making images on the computer. And there's nothing more that I love doing with my free time, really, than sitting in front of the computer and making stuff. Usually I do a lot of still images. I do a lot of environment art and used to do a lot of creature art. So I think I'm going to do that forever, because for me, that's my hobby. I mean, that's what I do for fun. So it's my career. But when what you do for fun happens to also be how you make a living, is when you're really lucky,
Yeah.
Because in the end, going to work isn't a job. There are days where it still is, and I know a lot of people work at studios that, they're working on a movie that they know is going to be a bad movie, or they have a supervisor that maybe isn't, great, that they don't get along with. But the reality is as far as jobs go, it's pretty cool. So I think 3D computer graphics, which is kind of the specific subset of visual effects, which is what I'm interested in. I think I'll do that as my career or part of my life, forever, because it's awesome and it's fun.
Have you had who helped you with your visual effects when you're coming up as a visual artist?
Well, for me, again, it was pre-internet when I was getting into this stuff, and so I would say when I took my year off, I discovered 3D computer graphics because of Jurassic Park. Started researching how to get into it, and discovered that while you could do 3D at home on a Macintosh, the programs you could get for a Mac at home back then in the early 90s were really slow, because computers were really slow back then as far as what you could get at home. And I learned that there were these computers that were a lot more powerful, made by a company called Silicon Graphics. They started at $50,000 for a computer and went up to $1 million. The $1 million ones were the size of a refrigerator. And the software that ran on them, there was a program called Power Animator, there was a program called Softimage, Wavefront, Advanced Visualizer, Kinimation, Dynamation. There were all these programs that were on the Silicon Graphics computers that had been around since the 80s. That is what the studios were using to do visual effects. And each one of those programs was $80,000. So if you wanted a computer, minimum 50 grand, and then the software, another 80 grand minimum. So I was like, well, obviously I can't afford that. And so I had to find a school that had those computers. Now today it's different. Like, any computer at home can do this stuff. There's programs that are free that are amazing. But back then I had to go to school. So I found a school that had the computers, went there. They didn't have any classes for this stuff. They just happened to have the computers with the software on it. And so to me, the thing is, being in that environment, being in an art college, surrounded by other artists, and then eventually meeting friends who also wanted to learn computer graphics, we would just hang out in the labs and figure it out on our own. And so that's what had the biggest impact to me, was finding a community of like-minded people and then motivating each other and inspiring each other to learn and get better. Like peers and peer groups and friend groups are so important. It's like the best thing you can have in life is to find something you want to get good at, find somebody that's better than you at that thing, and hang out with them.
Yeah.
Like, doesn't matter what it is you want to learn, like, that's the answer, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you're surrounded by a large group of people and all of them are better than you, it's going to make you feel a little insecure, right? But generally, artists are very supportive people, especially in the visual arts. Artists are always insecure, right?
Yeah.
Because any artist is aware of Michelangelo and Da Vinci or Frank Frazetta, or like name all these big, Todd McFarlane, to what, I mean, there's so many insanely talented artists in history that how can you be an artist and think you're any good?
Yeah.
How can you be an artist and think that you compare to Michelangelo? You can't, right? Artists stay insecure for their whole life. So that insecurity, right, ultimately does result itself in our industry as being supportive of each other. You all learn together and you work on projects together. And I found that in art school, that community was what influenced me the most when I was young, in discovering that people are friendly and want to help you. You know, because that high school doesn't feel that way, you know, and college can if you go to a college, but I went to such a big college, so much diversity, that I found a group of friends, but I didn't find people that were interested in the same thing I was, meaning art and video games and fantasy. So once you find that community, and for me that was going to art college, is when for me things started to gel, because I had all these people putting positive input into my head. You know, friends saying like, you can do it, we can do it, we're gonna figure it out. You know, like that's what made a difference to me.
Sounds cool. Art college seems awesome.
It is.
What's the best film or video game you're a part of that like is out or was out at one point in time?
Avatar. You know, I was super lucky to get to work on that, and I had a friend, Neville Page, who was the lead creature designer. There were a lot of creature designers on it, but he was in charge of the creature art department, and he gave me a call. I sat Gnomon, the school, and he was looking for a creature artist, a 3D artist, because the art department back then was mostly 2D, meaning people drawing, painting, sculpting in clay, some digital stuff, obviously, but they needed a 3D person. I recommended somebody else. That didn't work out. He called me again, and he described the movie to me and what they were doing. And nobody knew what Avatar was going to become. Right then, it was just like, oh, James Cameron, who made Titanic, and Terminator, is making a big sci-fi movie with a huge budget. And when it was described to me, it just sounded so cool.
Yeah.
That I was like, I'd like to work on. He's like, sure, and so he hired me, and I shared an office with him for 6 months. And art departments for movies are often not that long. There's a movie that's getting made, they have an art department, maybe they work on it for like a month or two to design the movie. James Cameron for Avatar created an art department that designed that movie full time for like 2 years before it went into production. 2 years. I mean, they're making 4 more Avatar movies right now. I don't know if you guys know, 4 more for some reason. And that art department's been running for the last 4 years, and the movies don't come out for another 2, right? So like, James Cameron's obsessed with design and hiring the best designers in the industry to design everything about the movie before anything goes into production. So I got to work on that for 6 months before we knew it was going to be a hit. And it was super fun working like with these crazy talented artists. And then the movie came out, and it ended up actually being good. Like, I mean, we read the script. That was like the first thing I had to do on the first day of the job, was read the script. And when you read the script for Avatar, it just sounds ridiculous. Like, it just like blue aliens, they're 9 feet tall, and like the whole battle at the end, like there's these dragon things, and they're fighting these helicopter spaceships, and you're just reading it like, this is ridiculous, and it sounds insanely expensive. And a lot of cheesy dialogue. And then I remember seeing the movie, and all of us were just walked out of the theater just like stunned, like, holy, that was amazing. And I think we all knew that we would just been so lucky. Like, we just worked on something that's like a landmark film visually. Like,
It's okay.
it was just visually so amazing. It still is. It's so inspiring, just the amount of design work in that film. So Avatar for me definitely was just so cool to be part of something like that. Yeah.
How long would it take you to make like a 1 minute clip? Like, is there like a specific time span?
How long to make a minute?
Yeah, a minute.
Depends what it is, because you could make a minute of animation in literally 5 seconds if it was just a cube spinning around, right? But if you want it to look like a shot from Avatar, that 1 minute could take you a year if you were working on it by yourself. So like the visual complexity of something tends to determine how long it takes to do something. But animation, like in the computer, it's like sculpting something out of clay, but you're doing it in the computer. And then you have to design the way it looks as far as, is it material, is it metal, is it wood, whatever. You have to light it. But it's just like building things on a set, but you're doing it in 3D in the computer. So once you've built it, you then have a camera that you can fly around inside there. So doing an animation is just saying like, well, a lot of shots are just a camera flying around a set. And that doesn't necessarily take a long time to animate. All of your time was in building the set. Now you're just animating a camera moving through it. But when you get into things like character animation, creature animation, effects animation, which is like doing explosions and smoke and all that kind of destruction. If you think of like Infinity War or like last couple Avengers movies that have like these huge cities that huge battles are going on and buildings are falling down, like that's completely computer generated and crazy complicated. And that's why a studio like Industrial Light and Magic has 2,000 people. Like 2,000 people worked on the visual effects on that movie or any other movie. Avatar, 3,000 people at Weta, which is a studio in New Zealand. So as you get into these crazy complicated things that we see in these big budget movies like Avatar or Avengers or whatever, that's when you need these huge teams, because for one person, 1 minute of animation might take them, the movie would never get done, And so ultimately big studios just throw a lot of people at it that just need to work collaboratively. So to make a 1 minute of animation, you can see it's like an open-ended question, because like, what's the minute? Yeah. So it could literally be, you could do it in a day, or you could spend the rest of your life on it.
How old are you when you created your company, Gnomon? Excuse me if I'm saying it wrong.
Gnomon.
So how old were you when you decided like, oh, I want to make a company just for this specific or this one area of art?
Right. I was 24. I was working at Alias Wavefront, which was a software company that made a program called Power Animator. Power Animator ended up becoming Maya, and Maya, even today, is still the #1 visual effects program on the computer. And so I was working for Power Animator, for Alias Wavefront, going to studios every day, doing support. And so all these cool visual effects studios, meeting all these artists, helping them figure out how to use the software and troubleshoot it. So every day, for a couple of years, I'm just meeting tons of artists all over the city. And computer graphics in the 90s were so new. Internet wasn't that busy of a place yet. There weren't any places online to learn anything. Like today, learning online, you just go to YouTube and type something in, there's a tutorial for it. Back then, no. So getting access to information and learning was kind of difficult. You could only learn from people. And I was meeting all these artists, and there wasn't a place in LA that had classes on entertainment art, whether it was character design, creature design, visual effects, animation, video games. Like there just was nowhere to go. And it was a common theme with these people that I was meeting, that we wanted a place to learn more, and for artists from different studios to get together and hang out and share information. So that's where the idea for Gnomon came from.
Yeah.
I just was in the right place at the right time. I started talking about the idea with a friend of mine that I was working with. We both thought it sounded like a cool idea. It's something to do on the weekends. Like let's rent a space somewhere, get some computers, and artists from studios can just hang out there on the weekends and share ideas, and do some workshops.
Yeah.
And then we got serious about it. Asked our boss if we could do it. She's like, sure, because she didn't think we were going to do it, I think. And then a few months later, like 6 months later, of working on it in my free time with my friend Marcel, we announced it at this big computer graphics conference. And my boss's boss was there. And I got called into the office the next day. And my boss was like, yeah, you can't do that. Like, you can't start a school on the weekends and keep your job here. And I was like, but you said I could do it. She's like, anyway, no, you can't. So I was put in a position where I decide, like, do I quit my job and do this or not? But after having spent 6 months thinking about it and planning for it and announcing it, like, I could not do it. I was just, and so that's where it transitioned from being a weekend thing to like, oh, this actually has to become like my full-time thing. Like I have to support myself off of this. So Gnomon started in '97, really small, just one classroom, smaller than this room. But immediately I started going to studios asking like, will you support this? You know, will you allow your artists to teach? And all the studios, like, the city needs this. Yes, of course, our artists will teach. A lot of studios started sending their artists to take classes at Gnomon. So that helped us really get through the first year, was a lot of studio support for us doing training. And then pretty quickly, people who wanted to get into the industry started contacting us. And that's where Gnomon started to grow as we expanded to service not just studio artists, but aspiring artists.
If you were never involved in this industry, like visual arts and animation, what would you be doing right now? Like if you never thought of it?
What would I like to, or what do I think I would have fell into? It's hard to say. I mean, it's like my other passion other than drawing is music. You know, like I've been spending a lot of my free time just for the last month learning Ableton Live, which is like this rad program. And so like, to me, if there was anything, you know, I got my first like synthesizer when I was like 12. My mom gave me one. And so that's always been a hobby, and taught myself to play the piano. And so like if there was another thing that if there was a parallel universe that I would have loved to have done is music, you know. What with music, I don't know. I just love making music.
Do you have any upcoming projects working on right now? And if you can tell us, I know not many artists and people like to tell us, or the radio anyway, or anyone in media. What can you tell us which ones?
Well, me personally, my career right now is focused on Gnomon, you know, and so I'm really just doing that. And so for Gnomon, we always have new projects coming up. Nothing that's particularly secret, though. Like there's an awesome website, I don't know if you guys know of, called ArtStation. And ArtStation.com has become like the #1 website for my industry as far as people sharing artwork. There's so much insane artwork from all over the world on ArtStation. And a friend of mine started it a few years ago, somebody I've known for 20 years. He's always been building these different community websites. And they had different levels of success. And a few years ago, at the right place, right time, he created ArtStation, and it blew up. I mean, millions of people a month are using ArtStation. Every artist that I know has a page on ArtStation. And so we've partnered together to do online classes. And so that's a cool thing we've been doing. We're doing these master classes. And so next month in March, we have our 3rd Gnomon ArtStation Masterclass online event. And so I got these really big artists. This is film design, the event we're doing next month. So it's 10 top designers from the film industry, from visual effects and stuff like that, that are each doing like 2-3 hour online workshops where they just do a 2 or 3 hour lecture and then answer questions from the community. And that's been really fun because it gives me a reason to reach out to like some of the top people in the industry and work with them to create these tutorials. And so that's been super cool. Like that's an awesome thing with my job is I get to meet like the most talented people, you know, to teach at Gnomon or to teach on things like this event. That it's awesome because these people are, you know, to me, iconic. You know, it's like to, you know, meet somebody and be like, they designed Iron Man, you know, or they designed this vehicle from the ship, or they designed the underwater city in Aquaman. You know, it's like I'm on the phone with these people and they're like, oh, what have you been working on? And those are the kinds of things that are, you know, coming out of their mouth, like, oh yeah, pretty much most of the city in underwater in Aquaman was, you know, I did most of that. And you're just like, that's so crazy that's your last gig. That's so awesome. And this was before it came out. And he's just like, yeah, but you know, I've just been really unlucky. A lot of the movies I've worked on lately have kind of been flops, you know, so I don't want to promote the Aquaman stuff until it comes out. Hopefully it's good. And I remember like Aquaman came out, and on his Facebook page, he was just like, oh my God, it's good. Thank God. And he just started sharing all this Aquaman artwork. That was insane. So for me, it's just more trying to figure out how to reach out to cool people, get them together and share their knowledge, whether it's at Gnomon in Hollywood or now online by partnering with people like ArtStation. So that's kind of what I'm got coming up.
Thank you very much for your time and being here today.
Yeah.
What would you tell somebody that, like, if that wants to be in visual, like, effects right now, if they were trying to be an up-and-coming artist?
I think that, this is the best time in history to self-learn anything. I think YouTube is full of great stuff. It's full of bad stuff, but it's also full of pretty good tutorials. I think if people are interested in visual effects or animation, just draw, read comics, play video games, watch sci-fi fantasy movies, fill your brain with that kind of information. But spend as much as time as you can drawing. I think the traditional medias are more important than the digital stuff. You can learn the digital stuff later. So like if you're young, draw. As you get older, there's a program called Blender, which is a 3D program, and it's free. And a lot of people are starting to use it. It's been around for a while. So if anybody's curious about visual effects software, I would say get a hold of Blender. You can download it for free. YouTube's got a bunch of tutorials. There's a Blender Guru, on YouTube. He's got a bunch of free tutorials. Andrew is a really nice guy. People really love his tutorials. He's got hundreds of thousands of followers. So I'd say subscribe to Blender Guru, download Blender, draw a lot, and that's kind of the best way to get started, I think.
Well, it's been a great interview with you. Unfortunately, it's time to stop the interview. I'm very sorry. Yeah. Thank you for coming. And do you have any social media people can follow you on, like Instagram, Facebook?
Yeah, Gnomon.edu, Gnomon. It's a weird word, but Gnomon.edu is the school. The Gnomon Workshop is our online tutorial library. I'm just alexalvarez.com, and through those, you can get all sorts of information. So
thank you so much for the interview, and thank you, Alex Alvarez, for letting us interview and taking up your time.
Of course, my pleasure.
And this is 101.5 KZKA FM, home of the Wolves. Thank you for listening in. If you want to hear any more interviews, tune in next time.